What's up? I'm about to eat some church's chicken.
Rate cuts. But what is the problem? The problem, quite simply, is that voters, people, economic participants, business owners, businesses themselves have all been impoverished by the price changes in 2021 and 2022 that were not inflation. And they did not have anything to do with a red hot economy that needed to be cooled off by some central bank somewhere hiking interest rates, which, like rate hikes don't do anything. So it's not because of higher central bank interest rates. That artificial high from 2021 and 2022, first part of it anyway, we're never going to be sustained. In a real recovery, the lost purchasing power at the beginning of it would be made up by actually robust and sustained recovery, where incomes rise faster as price changes slow. So prices may never fall. In fact, they're never going to fall, but incomes are allowed to catch up. And so voters caught on the fact that incomes weren't catching up and the labor market wasn't good, and the fact that it's getting worse, and all that just proves that incomes are not going to ever be able to catch up. They're never going to be able to get back all of that lost purchasing power. And instead, the pandemic era, already the 2020s, have impoverished almost everyone outside of a few very connected big businesses, impoverished everyone all around the world. And so incomes and jobs are now everyone's number one priority. In Canada, a perfect example. Not only do they have a whole ton of lost purchasing power, which again means they've been impoverished, people are poorer today, meaning they have to pay more to get less. So with rising unemployment in Canada and governments who say that you're too stupid to know how good you have it, I mean, no wonder the administration in Canada is falling around the rest of the world, because Canadians can see with rising unemployment, slowing nominal wage growth, big problems in the labor market, their ability to get back that lost purchasing power is not just diminished, it's almost disappeared. And so when the government comes in and says, you bunch of whiners don't know how good you have it, of course there's going to be a huge backlash. And that backlash claimed Justin Trudeau just today. As reported not that long ago, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced on Monday that he intends to resign as party leader and prime minister after pressure from within his own Liberal Party increasingly grew amid heightened criticisms over his handling of the economy, as well as threats levied by President-elect Donald Trump. They have to throw that last part in because at the end of the day, the mainstream media are going to do what mainstream media always does. And Trudeau said he will resign once the party selects a new leader. I intend to resign as party leader as prime minister after the party selects its next leader through a robust nationwide competitive process. That's what Trudeau told reporters. And it was always the economy that was leading to his downfall. Yes, there are other issues between left versus right, or whatever he considers left versus right. But at the end of the day, economic pressure heightens all of those divisions and has the ability for voters to blame whoever is in charge, because whoever's in charge likely tells them they're the ones responsible for when the economy is really good, or what they say the economy is really good. So you have to pick your poison here. Either you claim that you can control the economy, make things good when they're good, but you also have to remember you're going to get the heat when things aren't good. Consistently avoiding blame for economic circumstances that are poor, or even worse, not denying the fact that they're poor to begin with, you're only setting yourself up for a downfall, because reality has a way of intruding. And it just crystallized everything that's been happening in Canada for quite some time. This is not just a problem in the last months of 2024. It has been building ever since 2021, because again, the big problem here is, in a very simple term, the downside of the supply shock. They all said it was recovery when, in fact, it was a temporary illusion based on price. And in this case, prices worked against everyone, including voters, businesses, consumers, and in some cases, the governments. The Canadian dollar is a perfect example of everything that we're talking about here. It has been falling not just over the last couple months since the Federal Reserve has decided it was going to cut rates at a slower pace. It's actually been falling for quite a long period of time. It really started to tumble around the summer of 2023, Swap spreads, anyone? When conditions really began to tighten, when the global marketplace began to consider that rates are going to go down a lot farther than people were imagining, certainly in the summer 2023, and then stay there for a long period of time. The loonie has been following swap spread, but it even goes back further than that. You can go all the way back when you take out this sharp drop in September to October 2022, the gilt crisis that wasn't really the gilt crisis, the collateral crisis there. The weak Canada dollar trend began in June of 2021. Was that the Fed versus the Bank of Canada, or interest rate differentials or policy differentials? No. Those two operate very closely together. And even if there's differences in, say, rate cuts at a particular moment in time, they're more so a difference in timing. So the Canadian dollar began its current trend lower in June of 2021, right in the thick of the price illusion, when everybody said the economy was red hot. The markets, and it wasn't just the dollar exchange value and FX markets, it was markets all over the place, began to sense that the supply shock was an illusion. Didn't know when or how long it would take or what would happen along the way, but the risks were beginning to build, and then they would continue to build for this downside of the supply shock. That people were becoming impoverished, and that was not going to lead to a robust, sustained recovery, let alone some permanent plateau of prosperity, as many people were imagining at the time. So the weaker Canadian dollar is in many ways, a very good representation of this downside of the supply shock, and ultimately what led to the downfall of Justin Trudeau and a whole bunch of other governments around the world. The rising U.S. dollar against the Canadian dollar and a whole bunch of other currencies, from China's yuan and everything in between, that was the system saying it was a fake recovery, and the risks were going to continue to tilt toward the downside, which they have. And specifically, when we're talking about interest rates and central bank rate cuts, those are simply reflecting those fundamentals. As far as the latest macro data from Canada, just exclamation point on everything that's happened with the government there. According to Bloomberg, the Canadian economy appeared to lose its strength toward the end of this year, even as the central bank cut interest rates at a rapid pace, because rate cuts don't really matter. And Canada, like a lot of places, has an even worse problem developing on its hands. With the looming threat of tariffs and trade restrictions and trade wars and everything else, Canadian manufacturing, like a lot of goods economy production around the rest of the world, had been ramping up at the end of 2024. Which is already a warning sign, because if 2024 was weak to begin with manufacturing on another artificial high, what's it gonna look like on the other side when a whole bunch of that pulled forward demand has been pulled forward, which is now behind us? After everyone stuffed all the channels and got the goods made and shipped to wherever they're going, the United States, anticipating the tariffs, what then? Then production has to slow way down, if not contract, because all that demand was pulled to last year. We can see that in S&P Global's PMI data for the manufacturing sector in Canada was up to 52.2 in December, having been as low as 48 back in July. And you can see the acceleration beginning in September when the index moved above 50. And over the final months of the year, as Canadian producers began to ramp up more and more production to beat tariffs, it's starting to slow down already as of the December figure, and you can bet your bottom Canadian dollar that it's going to continue to get slower and worse in the first part of this year. That's what the Canadian dollar is saying. And after all of that, you've got unemployment. The unemployment rate in Canada is shot way higher, even as labor force participation rate has fallen in Canada too, which means the actual real unemployment rate, or real level of unemployment, is far higher than even the highest rate since 2016 already suggests. So economically speaking, Canada is increasingly in trouble. And the Bank of Canada, recognizing that trouble, has been cutting rates more aggressively, though the Bank of Canada said after doing 250 basis point cuts in a row, they're likely to slow down their pace of the rate cuts. But it doesn't actually matter. The fact that they're cutting as much as they have, and they're going to continue to cut, reflection and reaction to all of the same weakness. As I said in the introduction, this is not just about existing regimes and a warning to them. It's also a warning to incoming governments and administrations, such as those like in the UK, where the nominally conservative government was voted out of office this summer after a decade in power, the incoming Labor administration and its priorities don't necessarily align with realizing the economic circumstances there. In many ways, a lot of these new governments come in and think, well, we're just not the other ones, we're not the old people, so therefore we have carte blanche to do whatever our priorities are. No, what you were elected for was to, I hate to say this, fix the economy. Not that governments fix the economy, but that's what voters were expressing. They're expressing their frustration and disdain over economic circumstances. So if a government comes in and takes its eye off the ball, or never even had its eye on the ball to begin with, they're just different party or different ideology, that's not going to be enough. That's already what we see in the UK. As was reported at the end of last month, there were 2,124 retailers in distress in the period between October 1st to December 16th, a 25% quarter-on-quarter jump, at least according to a report by insolvency and restructuring practitioners Begbie's Trainer that was published at the end of December. The jump in the number of troubled retailers was likely determined by a surge in costs and coincides with the approval of the autumn budget, the government budget, which is set to increase expenses for employers according to Begbie's Trainer. Weaker than expected sales in November, and economic problems have not magically changed because of the incoming Labor government. They also impacted retailers as consumers held off on spending money in a crucial month for sales, and December being even more crucial. And the government in the UK, the new government, the Labour government, has not really said that, they've demonstrated no awareness that the economy should be their number one priority. Instead, they instituted this rate hike, or the tax hike, on employers, thinking that that's somehow going to help, at least with their priorities. Almost 1 in 4 British businesses cut jobs in December amid widespread pessimism over the squeeze on their finances from Labour's tax-raising budget. S&P Global's Purchasing Managers Index confirmed that the private sector stagnated at the end of 2024 with the weakest growth in 14 months. The final reading was at 50.4, slightly below the flash score of 50.5. But here's the thing. The closely watched survey showed that firms shed jobs at the fastest pace in more than 15 years, when excluding the pandemic, after the Chancellor of Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, hiked a major payroll tax in her October 30th budget. Some 23% of employers said they're going to reduce headcount. And the reason for the payroll hike was, according to the Independent in the UK, the largest tax-raising measure in its first budget. The new Labour government said the changes would raise an additional £23 billion for the Treasury in 2025, which would
that was good.
NHS and contribute.
Oh shit, bro! I just picked up my phone and realized I had a bunch of chats. YouTube didn't show any of them. When I picked up my phone, it showed all of them. Hey Blacy, what is the time? It's 10:40 p.m. here. I had some bullshit I had to do today. That's why I haven't streamed all day, really. How's the chicken, man? Sick. How do you? Oh, the chicken was delicious. I've been getting a lot of Church's chicken. Focus on the chicken. No, I didn't even see the chats. YouTube didn't say I had any chats. Straight NPC on that chicken right now. Yeah. They just had to make me hungry before bed. I always get hungry before bed, bro. Please teach me how to be like you, Mr. King. In what way? Financially? Eating habits? Not giving a fuck? Or playing video games? I don't know. There's a lot of different things you could be like me. But yeah, that was delicious. I'm gonna end the stream.